Welcome to this presentation on government information. In this presentation, we will be discussing several topics. Why government information is important in the larger information context, what is available at Fogler in paper, CD, and other formats, what is available on the web, how to assess this information, other resources available for evaluation and further searching, and finally, where to go if you have questions that aren't answered as part of this presentation. So let's get started with why government information is important in the larger information context. James Madison, as you see here in the slide, fourth president of the United States in 1822, writing to his friend Thomas Jefferson, wrote this statement, and really I think it portrays what government information is all about. Government information is us, it is the government, it is what we have done, it is what the government has done in our name as citizens of the United States. It's what we hope to do and how we hope to accomplish that. With that in mind, there are some specific instances and specific things that we will be talking about more fully, and how government information impacts our daily lives. The reasons for government information access and government information, the importance of government information, I think can be summed up or elaborated in some of the tenets that you see on the slide here. Keep in mind that the government has been producing information from 1789 to the present. The government is one of the largest producers of information, publishers of information in the country, and that has been true for many, many years. Government information, as I mentioned, is really us as a people and us as a government. There are large amounts of information that are published, as I say, because the government is one of the largest publishers in the country. Much of it is now currently electronically available, but historically that's not been the case. There have been, over the years, estimates of how much is electronically available. Only probably about 40 to 60% of the overall total of what the government has produced over the years is available electronically, though now about 95 to 98% of what is currently being produced is available electronically. To give you some examples of how what government has produced over the years and how that has impacted some of the decisions. An example is in the 1920s, the National Guard here in Maine listed all of the individuals that were participating in the National Guard. We've had requests over time for that type of information. It also includes Supreme Court cases over time. For instance, more recently, the decisions on the presidential election between President Bush and Al Gore. And more recently than that, we have information, obviously, on the marriage equality that the Supreme Court decided on just a couple of years ago. So, wide range of information, all the way from agricultural to Supreme Court, to the laws, to the budgets, to other information that is available. So I think you'll hopefully will find this useful going forward. So far we've talked in generalities about government information, why it's important, the tenets of government information. Let's turn now to some specific resources that are available and how you might begin to talk about how you might access some of these resources for your use and research. Each individual and each citizen obviously has access electronically through the internet, doing a Google search or some other type of search, to government information that is readily available on the internet. However, as I mentioned, 40 to 60% of the information really isn't on the internet yet. That is historical in nature or some other types of resources. And there are about 1,200 libraries throughout the United States that participate with the federal government in providing resources through the libraries to citizens of the United States. Fogler happens to be one of those approximately 1,200 libraries. And what you see on the slide here is the beginnings. In the next couple of slides you'll see some of the resources that every library that participates with the federal government has as some of the general resources available to the citizens and makes available. One thing I want to mention on this slide is you notice the logo of the stylized eagle in the lower right hand corner of this slide. As you travel around the United States and throughout Maine and the United States, each library that participates in the program has this should have this stylized logo. So it's a way to know when you're going to a library, maybe a public library, maybe a academic library, or a governmental library, that they will have both resources and staff available for assistance in answering questions you may have. Again, a large format, a large array of formats. There may be text, there may be CDs, there may be videos, posters, maps, charts, atlases, photographs, and obviously electronic resources available to you through this program. This slide is a continuation of the resources available from the previous slide. As I mentioned, each library will have these resources that participates in the program. They are part of the basic collection that the libraries are required to hold for patrons in the library. Couple of notes on this slide about some of the jargon that you may see. SLIP laws are the first way the public laws that the federal government creates are produced. The Supreme Court reports are the actual decisions of the Supreme Court that are the cases that are tried before the Supreme Court. And then the United States Code is actually all of the laws, the federal laws of the United States that are put together and grouped as by subject matter within the United States. One thing to note about the United States Code, if you were ever looking for, as a sidelight, if you were ever looking for a copy of the Constitution, there is a copy of the Constitution in the United States Code, right in Volume 1 of the 50-volume set. Now that we've had a brief snapshot of some of the resources available in the 1,200 or so libraries around the country, I want to talk a little bit on this slide about the program that the libraries participate in, and then a little bit also about how we came to participate in the University of Maine. Fogler came to participate in the program historically. Of the 1,200 libraries, there are two types of libraries that participate in the program. One is called a selective library, and one is called a regional library. Here at Fogler, we are a regional library. What that means is we receive all of the material that the federal government produces each year, and we work with what are called selective libraries throughout, and in our case, throughout Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And selective libraries are those libraries that choose materials appropriate to their patrons and their clientele. Each selective library in the program gets to choose what materials that they receive. So, for instance, a law library would receive probably much more in the way of legal materials, whereas a library that was perhaps primarily connected with an agricultural setting would receive more agriculturally and forest-related materials. A marine library might receive more marine and coastal resources. So they get to choose, as I say. In Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, there are 24 libraries currently that are selective that we work with, divided about evenly between the Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Each state has roughly the same number of these libraries. As I say, UMaine is the regional. We are obviously not the first, as you see on the slide, library to have designations as Federal Depository Library, though that goes back to the mid-1880s, 1884, as you see with Colby Bates, Bowdoin, and Portland Public and Bangor Public being some of the earliest libraries in the state with federal designation as libraries participating. UMaine started in around the 1890s and officially became, along with all land-grant libraries throughout the United States, a depository in 1907 as part of the Federal Printing Act of 1907. So again, as you travel throughout the United States further in your career, any library that is a land grant, and so for instance, University of New Hampshire, University of Vermont, University of Kentucky, University of California are all land grant libraries. Each state has a land grant library. They will be depositories participating in the Federal Depository Library Program, or FDLP as it's known. Here in the state, as you see, we became the regional for the state in 1962. This is when the regional and selective program came into being, and we became what's known as the Tri-State for Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont in 1966 as part of a cooperative agreement. We are, just a side note, University of Maine and the Tri-State was the first joint venture of this type in the program. There are now other regionals that serve other states as well. For instance, Connecticut and Rhode Island, or Florida serves the islands, Puerto Rico and the other islands in the Caribbean. Washington State serves Alaska. So there are other cooperatives, but we were the first in the program. How might one go about locating some of this material besides doing a Google search? Well, for users here in Maine, you can use URSIS, which is the online catalog of sources available both here at Fogler Library as well as throughout the other campuses of the University of Maine system. Maine State Library, Bangor Public Library, and you can also use Maine Infonet, which encompasses Colby Bates and Bowdoin, Maine Maritime, and other libraries as well. Within URSIS, all of the material that is currently arriving, all of the federal material that is currently arriving does have a record in URSIS. You can search by title, by department within the government. You can search by subject matter, variety of ways as you would search for other books and other material in URSIS. Lots of the material that it does appear in URSIS does actually link out to PDFs, as well as describing the material that is available in paper copy and CDs. We estimate that there are about 2.2 million items available to you, both in paper and electronic, through URSIS that we have available in the Humane collection specifically. Most of the material it has a record, though some of the material that is pre-1976, and we have material from 1789 on in our collection, but the pre-1976 material sometimes is a bit spottier and a bit more difficult to determine what we have. So in those cases, and if you get confused, as always, check with one of the reference staff or one of the government publication staff to ask for assistance that way. One thing to keep in mind, because we are a regional, and I mentioned that we are regional status a couple of slides ago, regionals, in addition to receiving everything, are required by law, federal law, to retain everything permanently. So that's why we have things from 1789, 1910, 1920, 1940s, 1960s, etc. The other libraries, the selective libraries, are required by law to only retain 5 years, the current 5 years. Some libraries do keep more than that, but they are only required to keep 5 years. So you may see, traveling around and looking at some of the other records in URSIS and throughout your travels further afield than Maine, you may see other libraries that have shorter runs or than what we have here at Fogler. All of the libraries, I say, that participate in the program, all the FDLP program that are in Maine, do have records in URSIS or Maine Infonet, and these are requestable through the URSIS and Maine Infonet program, just as you can request a book or a CD from the other campuses. You can request the material, the government publications material, the way you would this material. You can also request it through traditional interlibrary loan means. So that is always an advantage to you as well. We have estimated about 60 to 70%. That 2.2 million I mentioned earlier, that 2.2 represents about 60 to 70% of all of the material that has been published by the federal government over time. So we are continually working to add older material, historical material to the collection. And we have probably the second largest collection, regional collection in New England. Boston Public probably has a larger collection than we do, but we have probably the second largest collection, regional collection in New England, as I say. If you don't have a chance to get to Fogler to use some of the paper material and CDs that we have, this slide has some very useful resources that the federal government produces, mostly websites to do searching, and as I say, useful resources to know about. Just going to go through three of them that are especially useful in searching for government information. The first one, the USA.gov. This is a great source to go to for a variety of questions about the federal government, but especially good for things such as Social Security, how to access Social Security benefits, if you need to know where to go to and how to update your driver's license at the various states, it will dig down and find that. If you want to contact your senator or your representative, it will give you information about how to contact those elected officials. If you want to contact the governor of the particular state, it will give you the information how to do that, along with the laws and other information of that nature. The GovInfo, the third one down, is brand new actually. The government is still just in beta testing, but they do want individuals to try it out and also comment back on that. And it's a very nice and very clean interface to do searching on. This one will lead you to the federal laws, the budget, other very important information such as that, Supreme Court cases, if you need that type of information. One great thing about the GovInfo and also the Epdesis, which is the older version of GovInfo, directly above it. Both of these are what are called authenticated systems, so that if you need something that is official, the official record of, and that it with a track back, electronic track back to who produced it for legal purposes, that provides that type of information and that type of connectivity for you. I know legal and lawyers and judges use that a great deal. If you need information about the census and demographics about the census, the American Fact Finder is always a good source to go to. For historical purposes, the Digital Projects Registry is a great source. This is not actually, it's a registry of projects around the country that libraries and other institutions are doing on digitizing older material. As I mentioned, probably only about 60%, 40 to 60% of the public, what's been published by the federal government is actually electronic at this point. And the government has this registry or directory, in effect, of projects that are out there and are working on scanning and digitizing the older material. And then the GPO MetaLib is very similar in many respects to what you see as the OneSearch on the front page of our Fogler webpage. It will cross-search many databases that the federal government has and is very useful in locating information. We'll mention that all of these resources do appear on the database lists off of our Fogler databases page, and they are also listed in URSIS as well and MainCat as records. So that's always handy to note as well. A couple further links that I want to mention on accessing information, or government information that is. The web pages, our government publications web page is listed as you see there. That will give you access to a lot of the links that were on the previous slide, but also other information, census information and other information. I should mention also here at Fogler are a Canadian depository for Canadian documents, and there's information there on our publications page about the Canadian, about other international and UN documents that we hold as well. A couple of other things to mention. In addition to being a regional depository for government information, we are a patent library from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And information about patents and trademarks is available at the link that you see there on the page. Lots of great information on that page as well about how to search for patents and resources available in the library to learn about patents and trademarks. And then finally on this page, mention about the main state documents. Each state has, similar to the federal government, produces information for its citizens in the state. And the state documents that are in paper form actually happen to be located in our special collections, though increasingly similar to the federal government publications. Increasingly, the main state documents are available electronically, but the state page for the main state documents, as you see, is a link there. So just wanted to mention that. The special collections, if you haven't had a chance, is on the 3rd floor here in Fogler. And they check with them. They do have special hours if you are coming into the library to check on the hours of their availability. We began on the first few slides talking about government information and tenets of government information access. And on these next couple of slides, I want to talk a bit about government transparency, because as you remember on the tenets of government information access, a couple of them were that the government has the obligation to disseminate and provide broad public access to its information, and the government has obligation to guarantee the authenticity and integrity of its information. So there are watchdog groups and watchdog organizations, as you know, always in this era, talking about transparency, veracity of information, and listed just a few samples here on this slide of some of the sources that you might want to check for further to see how true, and if you have a question on truth and veracity with government transparency. Reporters Committee is always good one. Society of Professional Journalists. AALL, that stands for American Association of Law Libraries, is always a good source to go to for legal questions. Then ALA Freedom. ALA is the American Library Association. That's the American Library Association Intellectual Freedom Office is the one that is listed there. And then the National Freedom of Information Coalition. One of the things that is actually changing over time with government information is there's increasingly partnerships with large public entities that are not the government in managing their information, and also getting the information out to the government, out to citizens and out to the world. For instance, one of the things that is occurring in Sweden is the Swedish archives is actually now available through Wikipedia. We all know Wikipedia for a variety of reasons, but Swedish government has chosen to put their archival material in Wikipedia, knowing that lots of people will start with Wikipedia. The government publishing office that we've been talking about, which oversees the Federal Depository Library Program, is working with something called Digital Public Library of America, which Digital Public Library of America is a project going on to publish important information, important documents, historical and current documents of importance to American citizens. And then Hathi Trust, which is another large organization interested in dissemination of information. The Government Publishing Office is working with them to publish and to digitize some of the older government information that is available. So transparency is always important, and we're going to continue with some further locations on the next slide. Stay tuned. So this is a continuation of the previous slide on transparency. A few more sources to access on transparency and accountability to check. You see here the Freedom Info. It's a Temple guide at the Temple University. Is always a good source. Fact Check, which with the current elections is a source to go to for fact checking of statements, both by candidates and actual elected officials. I've already mentioned the Digital Public Library of America in the previous slide. Sunlight Foundation, again, is a good source to go to for checking on veracity of information with respect to the federal government. The neat part about the Sunlight Foundation is it has a phone app that if you need that and want that on your phone to check sources, that's always a good thing to have. And then at the top, we've got some acronyms. I want to talk a bit about some other related, government entities that produce information that the information isn't necessarily contained within government publications that we receive here, but are good sources to go to for further information about the government and also about research in general. NLM stands for the National Library of Medicine. They are the source to go to if you need medical related information. Lots of information there is available in PDFs, but it also is the ones, for instance, that physicians and nurses and other healthcare providers will use in researching a topic. AGL is the Agricultural Library, the Federal Agricultural Library. So again, similar to the National Library of Medicine, they have a large collection of research material with agricultural topics. They are the clearinghouse for agricultural research by the federal government. LC is the Library of Congress, always a good source to go to for researching topics. And then CIS reports, that stands for Congressional Information Service. These reports are the reports that are actually that Congress will receive as on a particular research topic if Congress asks the researchers to research. So Congressional Information Service reports are always a good source to go to for government information and government research as well. Hope you've enjoyed this, and I've got one more slide. So to wrap up, if you have questions, please ask one of the reference staff here at Fogler or your instructor. Or if you have questions about the presentation or government publications in general, shoot me an email. My name, by the way, is Greg Curtis. Enjoyed it. My office phone number is there listed as well. That's my direct number. If you dial the department number, you'll get one of the 4 or 5 people that work in the office, that I work in the office with. They will always be happy and assist you in any way they can. Or if you want to shoot me a note via Twitter, there's my Twitter feed is there as well. So hope you've learned something, and don't hesitate to ask a question if you have a question.